Well, as you can plainly see, this is not the van. That old van that got us all the way from California to New York was full of surprises on this road trip, but none more surprising than the present it gave me the other night, when all of a sudden the transmission went from acting funny to not acting like anything at all. I made it about an hour south of Elmira, New York, before all of a sudden there was no more transmission. And at least in D, the van wouldn't work at all. Luckily, I had the presence of mind to go, will it work if I pop it into first? Okay, will it work if I pop it into second? And I stayed in second gear for hours, driving 35 miles per hour down the highway. And there was construction on the roads and like 25 trucks piled up behind me. It was pretty hair-raising for being so slow. But I finally made it all the way to my hotel in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And the next morning, somehow, I got the van all the way down to a transmission shop where I met the owner, Ed. He was a really nice guy. And they've got the van down there now. And it is not great news. That thing needs the transmission either rebuilt or swapped out, and because all the parts are on back order, it's not getting rebuilt by them, it's getting swapped out, which is going to take a couple of weeks. Thankfully, the owner of the transmission shop drove me down to a rental car place, and they didn't have any cars. It was a tiny little spot, but the dude felt bad for me, bumped somebody else off the list, and I got this little Hyundai, at least until I have to fly back home in a day or two, hang out at home for a couple of weeks, and then fly back, get the van, and then, I don't know, adventure. Who could say? It's pretty depressing, I'm not gonna lie. I'm a little bit bummed out, but I figured rather than staying in the hotel and staring at the rain and getting bummed all day long, I might as well do something with my time, and so I've returned to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. That's right, rather than sit around and be depressed, I thought I would come to the Gettysburg National Battlefield Park. And we're now standing on the biggest battlefield, not only of the Civil War or in American history, but at the site of the largest battle ever fought in North America. All throughout these fields and woods and hills, Union and Confederate soldiers fought, bled, and died in the Civil War on this very battlefield, the place that some military historians call the apex of the Civil War, some call the turning point of the Civil War. This is certainly where the North began to win and push back the South all the way until retreat. So sort of the high watermark in a lot of ways. At least in the Eastern Theater, it is not the ideal day to be out here at Gettysburg, both weather-wise and considering kind of my mood. I can't lie, I'm a little depressed about the van and the road trip situation, but I'm grateful that we're stuck in a place where there's a lot of history around. And if I'm trying to keep in mind, it could be worse, there's no better place to come than the Gettysburg battlefield, because every man, woman, and child, and even horse that was around here for miles in those fateful days of July in 1863 had it a lot worse than whatever's going on with me today. The first time I came to Gettysburg was like 24 years ago, when I was in 8th grade, and I definitely lacked the appropriate context to truly appreciate this place. The bloodshed, the carnage, the smoke and shrapnel flying through the air. Gettysburg, or Gettysburg as the townies would have it, is a massive battlefield extending miles all the way into town and down along that ridge behind us. And if I'm not completely disoriented, the Confederates were way over there against that tree line. Even with years of study, it can be a hard place for an adult to wrap their brain around. And let me tell you, when I was in the 8th grade, it was really difficult to make heads or tails of this place. It's crazy to think how much blood and devastation happened here. All the carnage and chaos in what is one of the prettiest places, has to be, in the United States. I was hoping to get here on this road trip. I just didn't think it would happen like this in a rented car with my van at a transmission shop for the next several weeks. Look at all the amazing monuments out here. These were all erected, of course, after the battle by the men who fought here in memory of their fallen comrades and the deeds they did. There's so many different styles. Each one is unique. This one, I guess, fittingly, is in the shape of a giant bullet. 7th New Jersey Volunteers, killed 24, wounded 77, missing 13. Pretty wild and crazy. Owing to the gloomy weather, I was actually planning on coming out here tomorrow to film the town, kind of walk around. After everything that's happened, I'm no longer prepared. I don't have my head on straight for massive epic history videos of the type I would normally want to make at some place like Gettysburg. But mixed in with the conquest and the tragedy here, the town out yonder as a tourist destination is actually a pretty fun place to visit. So I will get to that tomorrow, but today I figured, dude, rather than sitting in the hotel getting bummed out, might as well use the extra time this morning to check out the epic Gettysburg Museum and Visitor Center set up by the National Park Service. Dude, it's been years and years since I've been in this museum, but I remember it being legitimately amazing. So, pretty darn excited. Looks like there's a lot of big groups in here today. Holy cow. Dude, even before you walk in the doors to the museum, look at all these artifacts. Heck of a lot of firepower in this place. Whoa, look at that thing. While the big group has been absorbed into the museum, there's still a steady stream of people. Kind of surreal after being alone for so many days and kind of the middle of nowhere. Even the guy at the front warned me, he goes, it's pretty crowded in there, but you can go in and out till 5, and plus I'm gonna be here tomorrow too. I can't tell you how many Civil War books and Gettysburg books I read before coming here on this trip, but I feel like all that traveling and all the issues with the van have like wiped my brain, you know? Still, pretty excited to be here, and the museum will provide a pretty good refresher. This place sort of runs the gamut of Civil War history, everything from the election of 1860 to John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. They even have the jail cell door of John Brown before he was hanged. He was the guy that tried to start a slave uprising and basically sort of incited the Civil War. Between him and Lincoln's win, wow. The southern states felt like they had no option but to secede from the Union. They fired on Fort Sumter, and the war was begun. I'm guessing people move through this museum in general very quickly, but there is a lot here. There's everything from how people were recruited to how they were armed at first, and how both sides were equipped and clothed. And the incredible thing is most of the stuff you see in here are not replicas. They are the real artifacts actually worn and used by soldiers in the Civil War. The soldiers' books and belts and games and whiskey jugs. And look at this splint used in a Confederate hospital. All I could think, looking at all the gear and woolen uniforms, is that everything here looks so uncomfortable. And that's even before all the marching and fighting and dying. All of these guys lived much more hardcore, uncomfortable lives than most people I know. Ah, the Emancipation Proclamation. As if those rebels weren't stirred up before. That really got them going. Dude, this was the stretcher that Stonewall Jackson was taken from the battlefield on. That's how insane some of the artifacts are in this museum. I mean, it's like world class in here. Aha, now we're getting to the Battle of Gettysburg itself. Wow, here we can see how they camped and lived while on the march, how they were called to march, and even some of their hygiene items, their toothbrushes and lice combs. Ugh, now I'm itchy. Ugh. I'm seriously impressed by the amount of equipment these guys had to carry, and in my brain I'm multiplying this by thousands and thousands and thousands of men. These guys must have been so tired out even before any of the shooting and the battles began, just from carrying stuff and wearing heavy woolen clothes all around the countryside. One interesting fact about the Battle of Gettysburg is that nobody planned on fighting here. It was kind of a total accident. There were Union forces in and around the town when the Confederates approached. They actually made them retreat out of town and up on Cemetery Hill. Such a famous battle, you'd almost think they planned to fight on this ground, but it was all pure happenstance. Dude, look at these beams from a building jacked up by shrapnel or cannonballs. How insane would it be to be minding your own business in your little hometown and then be all of a sudden surrounded by the war? Would have been pretty friggin' intense during those days, I can imagine. You can see here the town of Gettysburg and the way the Union forces were pushed back over here on this high ground, and then how the battle stretched way down south of the town itself. The Battle of Gettysburg was long, huge, really stretched out and insane. Impossible to capture all that information in a YouTube video, at least in one. Proof of that is I watch a lot of videos from the National Battlefield Trust, and they have many videos about Gettysburg. And even with all of them put together, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Or the bayonet. Look at this chest of drawers from the Trussell home. You can actually see damage from 2 bullets that came into the house and hit this dresser. Man, I highly recommend this museum, even if you only have an hour to spend in it. But really, you could spend all day in here, and it tells one heck of a story. Totally worth the 12 or 13 bucks, that's for sure. Look at all these displays about night fighting, and each one has so many artifacts from the battle. Look at that bullet lodged in that wood there. Look at this furniture from the house that served as General Meade's headquarters. General Meade, of course, was in charge of the Union side of the fight here in Gettysburg. And this is pretty awesome. This whole room has a lot of displays about Pickett's charge. That was the last desperate gamble of Robert E. Lee at Gettysburg. It was pretty much being all fought to a stalemate until General Lee sent all of his soldiers marching across the open fields towards the Union positions, where they were just absolutely decimated out there in those fields, and it forced a Confederate loss and their retreat. The Confederates, for the most part, had been winning most of the battles. The whole reason they came up into Pennsylvania is they were trying to bring the fight up to the enemy. It had all been down in the South. Their territory was getting all ravaged. Up here they could get supplies, spoils of war. Hopefully terrify the Union into letting them secede without any more issues, or even, best case scenario, get themselves into a position where they could at least threaten Washington, D.C., and hopefully intimidate the United States into letting the Confederacy exist. But dude, look at this. This battle was massive. On the left, these are faces of many of the Confederate casualties. And on the right, men from the Union. 3,500 Confederates were killed, 18,000 were wounded, 6,500 were captured or missing, a total of 28,000 Southern casualties as opposed to 23,000 for the United States. The U.S. won the battle, but just like many other Union victories, it came at a very high price. 32,529 wounded men were left strewn all over this area. And owing to the medical science of the time, it was a pretty gruesome business trying to help these wounded men. A lot of limbs were cut off, and this kitchen table from Gettysburg became an amputation table. For generations, people have been finding bones in town from amputated limbs or from forgotten and buried Union and Confederate soldiers. And many of the wounded died after the battle from their injuries and from the treatments for their injuries. There were thousands of dead bodies all over this town. Dead bodies which led to Gettysburg having to build a massive cemetery, at the dedication of which Abraham Lincoln arrived, where he delivered the Gettysburg Address. These two chairs were actually located on the speaker's platform the day Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address. Abraham Lincoln might have sat in this very chair we're looking at. It's pretty heavy to read the Gettysburg Address after being here at the battlefield. If you haven't read it in a long time, I suggest taking a look at it. There's a reason it's considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest, speech in American history. Of course, the Civil War would rage on and on, far beyond Gettysburg, and would still continue for a long time before Lee's eventual surrender. And in the Gettysburg Museum here, they actually have the exact pen Ulysses S. Grant used to sign the surrender agreement with Robert E. Lee. Heavy stuff in here. Well, with the surrender and the death of President Abraham Lincoln, the Civil War was pretty much over. And that's pretty much where the main part of the museum ends, with a little bit of information at the end about how in the town of Gettysburg, the war never really ended at all. So many monuments were constructed here. There were so many reunions of soldiers. And of course, with everything that had happened here, there was no way people were just gonna pick up and move along, particularly when untold millions of people began to stream into the town to see where America's biggest battle was fought, and certainly one of its very most important battles was fought. Man, it was so awesome to visit this museum again. Still the same amount of epic stuff, but the layout was completely different than I remembered. Cool thing is, it did provide me with a bit of a refresher, a well-needed one. And not only that, it got me super pumped up to be here at Gettysburg. Trying not to get too pumped though. You don't know how bad I want to buy everything in this gift shop. But I've still got to fly home and eventually fly back again. Whoa, dude. It's raining now. Little thunderstorm action in Gettysburg today. Not too much thunder though for a thunderstorm, but That's what the weather app says. All right, well, the rain has passed by, and relatively speaking, the sun has come back out-ish. And now that I got a little bit of a refresher, I decided to come back out here to Cemetery Ridge, where the Army of the Potomac, the Union Army, was up here defending the high ground on the eastern side from the Confederates, who were across this little valley there, and who were also, by the way, still occupying the town of Gettysburg there. So the Union Army went all the way around this ridge, defending it on the east, north, and west sides. I love that they left that tree there all crumpled over. I don't know if that got taken down by a storm, or was cut down, or fell over, or if it's dating all the way back to the Civil War. I kind of doubt that, but you certainly would have seen a lot of blown apart trees across these fields back when the cannonballs were shooting all over them. Remember all those different types of monuments from earlier? Check this one out. Would you look at the size of this? This is the Pennsylvania monument out here. And of course, Pennsylvania wasn't going to be outdone by any other state or company or anything. I mean, after all, they were fighting here on and for their native soil. Dude, out of the 3 or 4 times I've been to Gettysburg, I don't think I've ever climbed up on this monument. Ooh, pretty tight quarters when people are coming down. Oh boy. Ooh. Wow. Oh man. Didn't expect to get so winded today. Let's check this out. What a great view. I don't like this. Okay. It occurs to me standing up here, we have a much better view of the battlefield than the actual participants did from up here. You can certainly see a long way, almost all the way to town over here. And there was fighting all along here, all the way around us. All the way up over there on Little and Big Round Top. If you were suspended up here in 1863, if you could see through all the smoke, you would have seen a lot of battle. All right, back down through the dungeon hole, down the long, twisty staircase. Whew, which is somehow even longer going down than it was coming up. Ooh, what a monument. I mean, look at the size of it compared to the people in that doorway. Man, it's bigger than it looks like it is from the ground. I actually caught a glimpse of the back of Lincoln's head from those windows up there. It was still a long way down. Those are huge statues. Things like that are always bigger up close than you think they're going to be. Battlefields like this can take quite a few days to really wrap your head around the terrain. And if you want to get into it, any Civil War site really, but especially Gettysburg, it is a deep rabbit hole of history, my friends. Man, there's so much to see out here at the battlefield. And so many people out here seeing it. Like I said, for my money, it's one of the most beautiful places in the United States. It's gorgeous. Hard to imagine it full of screaming, fighting, dying men. The constant popping of rifles and thundering of cannons. And obviously, not just in the day, but all throughout the night. So many bugs out here, even little red ones all over the signs. Don't lean on them. Hard to imagine how many horrible, bitey, itchy, scratchy things you'd have to deal with if you were just dropping your blanket on the ground and sleeping here, if you were lucky enough to have your blanket with you. All things considered, I'm feeling pretty grateful that I have a hotel to go back and sleep in tonight. All right, I've scouted out some good spots that I remembered to come back to tomorrow, and some to come back to when I come back for the van in a couple of weeks. But for now, I think it's time to scrape my carcass off the battlefield and make my way back towards the town. There's at least one thing I really want to try to see, just in case there's not enough time to really see it tomorrow, and that is the National Cemetery here in Gettysburg. I mean, not the most lively, jovial place to be, but I like to pay my respects to the men who came here to fight for the Union and never went home again. If I can find it again, because I told the lady at the visitor center, like, oh no, I don't need a map. I remember where everything is. I hope that's true. Oh, wow. We made it. This is the famous cemetery during the dedication of which Abraham Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address. You can see there's another cemetery behind me. That's the town cemetery that gave its name to Cemetery Ridge, where all the Union forces were entrenched. And here, row upon row, are those very Union soldiers. But don't forget, the Civil War had been dragging on for years at this point, with really no victory in sight as far as the general population was concerned. The Emancipation Proclamation had been put into effect, but it wasn't universally popular. A lot of people were asking themselves, what are we fighting for here? And at the dedication ceremony to this graveyard that was established right after this big, important Union victory, Abraham Lincoln, who was sort of an afterthought, he wasn't the main speaker out here. The main speaker spoke for hours. His name was Edward Everett. Anyways, Lincoln was sort of just going to give a few remarks as an afterthought, but he used that opportunity to remind America in under 275 words, in less than 2 minutes of talking, just exactly what it was they were fighting for. And he did it right here at what is now the site of the Soldiers' Monument, which is surrounded, we're surrounded, on all sides by rings and rows all around us of the Union casualties. The speech began, of course, 77 years ago. Our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this, but in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Oh, my eyes. Something's in my eyes. It's sweat. They're getting sweaty with respect. Truly an amazing, an inspiring place to be, even if you just have a little bit of context. Man, this is heavy, Doc. All right, well, I think that's it for me today. I'm gonna lay siege to the town of Gettysburg myself. Tomorrow, we'll stroll about town, see what we can see, try to lift the mood a little bit. This cemetery, by the way, quickly before I go, also contains the honored dead from other American wars, World War I, World War II, Vietnam. So it's a pretty heavy place. There was a lot here, and I'm truly glad we got to come and pay our respects. For now, though, that's all I have to say in Gettysburg for today. But I guess I should have elaborated about the van, so let's head out of the cemetery, back to the hotel, and I'll let you know what the rough plan is. Oh my gosh. I'm not gonna lie. I am so tired now. Just the whole journey, which normally, like, I'm still, I've got momentum, I'm feeling good, and so the whole long journey only helps me to keep rolling, keep going to new spots. But as soon as that van came to a rest in this hotel parking lot that night, after cruising down through the whole state of Pennsylvania at 35 miles an hour, with all the trucks behind me and people honking, and it started to rain, it got all dark, I felt suddenly so tired. I felt all of those 2,000 something miles, just maybe almost 3,000 miles just falling down on me. And in fact, what happened was I woke up the next morning and I looked out the window and I felt this just like anxiety rising, depression settling, like, oh, now what? And I was like, no, you've been kind of trying to mentally prepare for this possibility the entire time. And I was just telling myself, don't freak out. Don't freak out. Not yet. Do your thing. Do what you need to do, man. Freaking out does not help. So I kind of talked myself through it. I got down there. It's like sometimes like the simplest thing to do, which is like get in there and try to move it. If it doesn't move, call a tow truck, take it to a shop, see what they say. It sounds simple, but sometimes when you're overwhelmed it's like that one more thing, just that one last thing you need to do seems impossible. That's sort of how it was, but I was like talking myself through, like, all you got to do is this. So I got in the van, and it thankfully went back in 1 and then 2, although 2 wasn't working too good anymore. And I took it all the way down to Emery Transmissions down here, not too far away, outside of Harrisburg, on the other side of the river. And that's where I met the owner, who was super nice, super cool. Gave him some random land stickers and told him about what the heck I was doing all the way out here. And he was super awesome. He was like, I'm going to do the diagnostic myself. And before they could check it out, he drove me over to a lot. I told you, I'm tired. To a rental car lot, like I said. It was a really small place, and he was like telling the guy, we do all your transmissions and the whole thing, until the guy like found me a car. And that was pretty awesome of him. And so he went back to go check out the van and all that stuff. And I got a call later that night, which was, dude, I don't know how in the world did you drive this thing all the way down the state? How in the world did you even get it here? He goes, I drove it around the block. And he's like, it's not doing well at all. He's like, I put the 4-ways on immediately and just circled right back, brought it right back in the thing. He goes, it needs work. Yeah, it needs work. And like I said earlier, they could either rebuild it, but there's a shortage of pumps and some other stuff that belongs in the transmission if they were to rebuild the whole thing and replace the parts. And so it would be cheaper, but it would take a long time. So unfortunately, the best option is, and a question mark long time too. It could be August. It could be October. I have no idea. So, and they have no idea. So for this particular transmission, they're able to get one that's already refurbished, already rebuilt, and it has to get shipped here though. And then they've got to mount the whole thing, install the whole thing. And since they're all back ordered with everybody and everything else in the whole country, it's going to cost me like $3,600 or something like that. It's going to cost a lot of money. On top of that, I can't wait here until the middle of June, which is, they're going to try and get it done sooner than that. He's like, I'm going to try to help you. I know you're from out of town. I know you got to fly back and fly here, or you'd have to wait around, which is why they did all the investigating that day, because he was really trying to get me back on the road if he could, because I was like, I could hang out a week if I really had to. I really didn't want to. But he was like, no, it's going to take until, guaranteed date sometime in June, like middle or end of June. He goes, but it could come sooner. Like if the vendor with the transmissions could get it here sooner, then it could be sooner. I don't know, but certainly that meant like, oh, I'm gonna have to fly home. So I pulled all my stuff out of the van to put in here because I didn't know where it was gonna go or how long it was gonna be there. And I extended my stay in the hotel so that I would be covered until I could fly home. I immediately booked the first reasonable flight home, which was not that reasonable. So on top of the $3,600, I got to fly home, which is pretty expensive right now, along with gas. Plane fare is kind of pricey. And I can't get all of this stuff back there, so I do have a cousin who lives about 35 minutes north of Harrisburg. And so I'll probably take stuff like the cooler and like the big tub that I use for food and some of the other stuff and leave it at her house, which is cool. In fact, yesterday I got to spend time with my cousin, so it was kind of nice because I got to spend time with her and see her 3 kids and meet I don't know if they're boyfriend, fiance, I don't know, but meet her family basically, which was super awesome. They were all really sweet. And so that was nice. It's my cousin that lived in California until she was like 13, 14, 15, something like that, and then moved out here, and that we don't get to ever spend that much time with. So anyway, my uncle's in the cancer treatment, and it's his daughter, so it was nice to see her, and we were kind of talking together and stuff like that, and it kind of like, it felt nice to be somewhere peaceful. So that's what I did the first day after all this happened. I was like, dang, this sucks. But yeah, it was sort of a gut punch, kept me in a low mood today. In fact, it didn't really hit me until today. I was pretty positive once I got there, and then the next mission was to go get the rental car, and then I went to my cousin Jess's house, and all her kids were so cute. Like, she has a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old and a 12-year-old out there, and so they were all cool. The 12-year-old's chopping wood and showing me, and they're showing me their drawings and stuff. So that was great. That kept me distracted and positive and happy to be with family and all that. And then today I woke up this morning and I knew the weather would be kind of so I was like, all right, well, I'll drive down to Gettysburg anyway, as you saw. But I just the whole drive down there was just like, it's not like the end of the world. It's not total devastation. I knew this could happen. Worst case scenario, I told myself the whole time was like, if the van transmission breaks or the motor has to be rebuilt, you're going to have to fly home. It's just, now that it's actually happening, it feels like such a heavy chore to do it. Like, I'm going to have to drag my bones around and figure out how to do all this stuff. And the flight isn't for a few days, so that is the thing. All that momentum just, right, like it's all rolling on top of me. So I sort of have a low mood, but I'm trying to stay positive. It's a whole quest for positivity thing. Like, I can't control the circumstance. I am where I am in the situation that I'm in. And by the way, yes, I did check tons of other transmission shops to see if there was a lower price or another option, and all of them could not get me in for 2, 3, 4 weeks. I mean, I just have to leave it here and guess. It's just, this was the one place. It really worked out. The owner was super nice, super cool. Drove me to that place, like I said. Offered to pick me up from the airport when I come back and take care of me. So, it is sort of what it is. It's a lot more money than I was expecting. But circumstances being what they are, it just sort of, like I said, it is what it is. So, I will be flying home. And I'm sure we'll have some adventures at home where I have 2 other working cars. Our normal cars are there, mine and Allie's. And I'll be very happy to see Allie again. I'll be very happy to see my son and see all my friends and everything. But I'm probably, in the back of my head, I'm going to be just thinking, when's that van going to be done? I got to get back on the road. Because it just feels so unfinished. The journey feels so unfinished. But to be fair, the last week of the journey felt like moving through tar. It was just so slow and sluggish. And I just felt like off because I knew the van was like, whack, like something was wrong with it, right? Obviously it was shaking itself to death. And by the way, that's the thing. So apparently that harmonic balancer that was broken, all that rattling that was doing up to the drive shaft and to everything else, roached the transmission. So that is what happened. That's why I didn't throw the transmission code until like a day or 2 before I left my uncle's and it broke and everything. So it's been a little bit of a wild ride. I'm sure there's tons of armchair mechanics out there like, no, you should have done this or done that, but I had to make the best judgment call that I could make in the driver's seat that I was in the situation, in the place that I was in, with the information that I had. And the shop seems great. Seem like really good guys. And I'm sure the van will be fine. It's just, the situation, the trip, the journey was a little bit humbucked. But on the plus side, basically, had the van survived, had the van been running perfectly, I would have got here. And if I'd even got to here, I would have had just today's worth of Gettysburg, maybe if I was lucky. I'd be barreling west so fast that I wouldn't even have a chance to stop and see anything because I lost so much time due to the van before. And this way, I could time it to fly back at such a time where we can take 2 or 3 weeks to go home instead of, 7 days. And then hopefully we'll be able to do more stuff, see more things. And it's kind of neat because we'll be starting from this side of the country instead of that side of the country. I did consider just getting a rental car and driving home and continuing the journey, but for the rental car to go one way that way, they wanted $3,000, so almost as much as just fixing the van. So I thought, that's no solution here because I'd still have to fly all the way back, right? So that would just make my plane ticket go from however many hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars in the form of a car. So anyway, I'm hoping, it's one of those situations where you hope you make the right decisions, but you're tired, you're stressed out, you're kind of at the end of your budget and your brain and the whole thing. And anyway, as a friend of mine would have said, that's why God invented Visa, right? That's what the emergency credit card in an emergency and a pinch is for. It stinks to have to use it for this, but it is what it is. So I'm going to head back down to Gettysburg, check that stuff out tomorrow, and then there's 1 day left where I'll have a chance to hopefully go to Walmart or something and buy another suitcase, because all I got is this duffel bag here that can go on a plane, and it's too full, probably too heavy. And I've got camera stuff and everything, so as long as I get my clothes, the camera stuff home, laptop, I should be good, leaving almost everything else here for the time being for a few weeks. And there's a lot of stuff going on back in California, back home. So there'll be plenty to do, see, adventure. And as you can hear, I'm pretty worn out. I could probably use a little bit of a rest anyway. So every cloud's got a silver lining. Everything happens for a reason, my grandpa used to say. So I'm trying to believe that and stay positive and focus on the things that I can control. And right now, I think the one thing that I need to control is getting a little bit more sleep. I think I got like 4 hours of sleep last night before today, which clearly doesn't help elevate the mood. It's good that I got out, though. Getting out, moving around, accomplishing things, even if they're simple, is like key if you're feeling depressed at all, whether it's, unnaturally or naturally or whatever, or circumstantial, any kind of depression. The best thing to do is get up and try to get moving and try to do as many things as you can. Simple list, try to achieve things. So went out and achieved things today. Went down there, Gettysburg Address, Gettysburg Museum, pretty cool. Scoped out the town for going down there tomorrow. There's some cool shops down there I want to check out. And kind of even scoping farther for like, there's some cool ideas for filming stuff. When I get the chance to come back and pick up the van, it might not be a bad idea to stop by again, perhaps. So, that's about it. That's about all I can do. That's about all I can say. I just wanted to, at this stage of the journey, with all this stuff having happened and you guys being along for the ride for the entire time, all the way from Route 66 to the Lincoln Highway where we were earlier today in Gettysburg, it's been a pretty wild journey, and I didn't want to leave you out of what happened, but I couldn't even film it when the thing started breaking. I was like, nope, got to deal with this. It's like I need all my mental energy. And right now, I really, really need to get a good night's sleep, wake up tomorrow, and let's hope the weather's a little bit better. And we can cruise around the town of Gettysburg, as the people down there say, Gettysburg, and have a little bit of fun. But for now, my friends, I've done my duty. I need to motel and sleep well. I'm supposed to tell you to make sure to check out store.randomland.com, and the hats and the fun shirts are getting restocked, and that's all awesome. I wish I sounded more excited about it. I will sound more excited about it later. Right now, what I'm the most excited about is crawling into that bed and passing out and being unconscious. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out on the whole journey. You guys were the best part of it. The van was sort of the worst part of it, shaking itself to death. But I could look at it one of two ways. I could look at it like, this stupid van betrayed me. Or I could look at it like, dude, that thing got me all the way to my uncle's, who, is dealing with crazy cancer, going to treatment. And because it was broken and needed that harmonic balancer fix, I got to spend extra time with him, which I'll never regret. And then it made it all the way to Elmira, New York, which was cool. And then it made it all the way, it made it all the way through these 2-lane, because I got lost. It made it through all these 2-lane Amish farm roads. I'm pretty sure Amish people can't fix transmissions, or don't typically fix transmissions. And so I was rolling through all that territory with no self-service when I got lost. No self-service, and it was shifting fine, and everything was cool. It didn't break until I got on the main highway, right? And there was a Walmart. I pulled over, and when I went to restart the car, it would not go into gear. But that was like right on the border of when I had got cell phone service again. Not that I was thinking of any of that. So it and where it was just pretty much cruising down mainly just one highway all the way down to this hotel I had already booked near my cousins in a big town with transmission shops. So I could look at it like the van saved me and it still worked in those low gears just to get me here, and then pretty much collapsed on its last legs and shot a bunch of metal into itself and, committed seppuku over there. So, it could have been worse. It could have been a lot worse. In fact, I'm feeling pretty grateful that it all worked out the way it did. If it had to work out that, the van had to stay somewhere and I had to fly home, it kind of worked out pretty darn good. Can't control the flight prices, can't control the transmission prices or the shortages or the supply and demand, but all things considered, we survived. So, at least one more adventure, I hope, unless it just storms the whole time, and then we'll be headed back to California. I have no idea what we're going to be doing there, but we'll be doing something, and then we're going to head back out to the East Coast at some point. But try not to let my mind wander too far ahead. One day at a time, one step at a time, and the first step is sleep. So you have also done your duty. Thank you for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me. Go home and sleep well.
Gee. Sure is quiet around here. Kinda dull. We should see what the man is doing out there. Let's see. How do you work this?
Back order. It's not getting rebuilt by them. It's getting swapped out, which is going to take
this is
a
great!
couple of weeks. Thankfully, the owner of the transmission shop drove me down
He'll
that place,
have to
and
come
we didn't
back
have
now,
any
and when he
cars. It was a
does,
tiny
Randy the
Randy
Randomware Rat will be the official
somebody else off
mascot
the
for
list.
sure.